Hello, I'm Dr. Laura Murillo, President and CEO of the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. As you know, we work very closely with our elected officials. Regardless of party, the Chamber does not endorse candidates. We work with those who are in office to make sure that they are serving our constituents and theirs. And of course, business, big priority for us at the Chamber. So we're happy to have someone who's very supportive of business and understands the needs of entrepreneurs. No one less than Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Dr. Murillo. I'm so delighted to be with you. I admire your leadership and your work in our community so much, and I always love the chance to visit with you.
Well, thank you. And let's go ahead and get started. Businesses, tariffs, taxes, just so much unknown for our entrepreneurs. Give us some ray of hope for those entrepreneurs.
Oh gosh, Dr. Murillo, it's been a tough year and a half, and really a tough 5 years for businesses across our community, with all kinds of uncertainty, certainly coming out of the COVID pandemic that was so disruptive and really changed so much of how we do our work here in Houston and across the country. But certainly the last year and a half have been particularly difficult. And we know a huge part of that is just that costs keep going up and things are less affordable for businesses, for consumers. Whatever work you do, it's more expensive. And one of the challenges, certainly that we've seen, has been this administration's approach to tariffs, which have raised the costs on folks. We know costs are going up for healthcare. We know costs are going up for food and groceries. So whether you're a small business that's operating a restaurant, or whether you're operating a big business that's trying to build infrastructure, there's so much uncertainty right now. And one good thing is that the Supreme Court has said the president's approach to tariffs is unconstitutional, and the president didn't have the authority to impose the tariffs that he has. Of course, he responded to that by saying he would just figure out how to do them another way. So continues to be a challenge. And one of the things that I hear from businesses and folks who work in all kinds of ways in our community, that the uncertainty in the environment is the biggest challenge they face. And so in Congress, we are trying to work to do that, to check some of the policies of the administration as much as we can, and to pass legislation that's going to help make a more predictable environment for folks to operate in. But right now, that has been very, very challenging, and continues to be.
Congresswoman, let's talk about Homeland Security. We've got the World Cup around the corner, so many different things in Houston that are occurring. Give us some good news as it relates to Homeland Security, please.
Well, when it comes to Homeland Security, of course, one of the challenges that we've seen here in Houston has been the delayed funding for TSA. That has affected travelers coming to our city. I was just in town last week for Sarah Week, and what an incredible time when we had so many people coming to Houston, more than 10,000 for Sarah Week at the George R. Brown downtown, and the incredible innovation and the work that was happening, coming at the tail end of the rodeo, another great time of year. And of course, it's been so beautiful here. This is the best time of year to come to Houston. We will have the World Cup coming this summer, and all the excitement that brings with it. And traveling to Houston has been a huge challenge because of the funding dispute over the Department of Homeland Security. And I'll tell you, Dr. Murillo, I mean, the good news is those TSA agents at the airports are finally getting paid. And the president signed an executive order directing the Department of Homeland Security to pay our hardworking TSA agents who make sure that we're safe at the airports. Of course, this was something the president could have and should have done 40 days ago when this began, because the money is there. Last summer, the Congress passed a bill that gave a lot of money to the Department of Homeland Security that could have paid those officers all along. And there is a standoff that has not been resolved yet. I know people get really tired of the finger pointing and just, are frustrated with what's happening in Washington, and I am too. I am really frustrated that we had a bipartisan deal that the Senate passed last Friday, but the House wouldn't take it up. The House wouldn't do the bill to fund all of the agencies in the Department of Homeland Security, with the exception of the enforcement divisions at Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Border Patrol. And there's a reason for that, and we can certainly talk about it more, but I have joined my colleagues in really objecting to the tactics and the directives that have been implemented in this administration around immigration and customs enforcement, and immigration enforcement and removal in particular. And so House Democrats and Senate Democrats have demanded that I think things that are really shouldn't even have to be demands, like the officers comply with the Constitution, and that they follow the same rules that all other law enforcement agents and agencies in this country are required to do. And so there was a deal to fund all of the other divisions of Homeland Security other than those enforcement provisions relating to immigration, because we are still working on that. And I can tell you, Dr. Murillo, my phone has been ringing off the hook. People across our community and people across the country are so upset by what they have seen in terms of immigration enforcement, including certainly the murders of 2 American citizens in Minnesota this year, but also abuses in immigration enforcement and detention, separating families, sending so many people here to Texas to be detained, and a lot of questions about how and why those things are happening. It is not consistent with our values or the president's statements that they were kind of looking at enforcement against the criminals in our communities. Instead, we find that 5-year-old children are being sent alone to Texas to be detained, and that is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to me. It is not acceptable to people in our community. And asking to get reforms at ICE and at Border Patrol operating well beyond the border and in our communities is absolutely critical. So that's kind of the origin of the standoff. But there is a deal to be had on the table. And the House, which is, of course, not to be partisan, but controlled by House Republicans, they decided that they didn't want to do that. And so we remain in an impasse around that funding. But I'm glad to report that the president has paid our TSA officers, but there are people who work in the Department of Homeland Security who still aren't being paid right now. I think it is unreasonable to ask our public servants to go without pay. And certainly there's money to pay ICE and Border Patrol because they got $75 billion, when you add it all up, more than $100 billion last summer in this, what they call the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so there's a lot of money out there for that. We can discuss how we can meet our objectives and also do it consistent with our values. And right now, that's not what we're seeing. And so I think it is essential that the Congress take that up. And as a representative for a community where 1 in 4 people here in the greater Houston area is born in a foreign country, we know how important it is to welcome people from around the world and to have a fair immigration system. We also know it's broken here, better than maybe anybody else. And so we need to do our work to make reforms, but we cannot do them the way that this administration is doing them right now. And that's a huge challenge, not only for our community, but for people across the country. And so we need to make sure that we can ensure that the functions of Homeland Security continue, because it's everything from cybersecurity to airport security. But we also need to do that without targeting our communities and making people afraid. And that's what I hear here in Houston. And that's not who we are. That's not what we value as Houstonians. And we need to make sure that actions that are being taken in our names by our government are done consistent with our values. And that's a huge part of what the fight is right now in Washington.
So as we wrap up, let's talk about some positive things out of your committees that you're serving on.
So I serve on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. We arguably have the broadest jurisdiction of any committee in Congress, and we cover everything from energy quite obviously, to healthcare, to technology and communications. And so one good thing I will share is that last week in our committee, we passed a bill that I introduced with Congressman August Pfluger from Texas, as well as Representative Mark Vesey from Fort Worth and Buddy Carter from Georgia, called the Mystic Alerts Act. And that is a bill to encourage cell phone providers to use satellite technology to make sure that no one ever misses emergency alerts. And it's really an opportunity to learn the terrible lessons that we learned last summer here in Texas with the Hill Country floods and the loss of our fellow Texans, and to try to make things safer for people across the country. And so that was a positive. It was a bipartisan bill that we introduced, and it passed unanimously out of our committee. Of course, our committee continues to do other important work. I'm very hopeful that we will move forward with some permitting reform that'll make it easier for businesses here in our community in Houston to build these great energy infrastructure projects, and to make sure that we, as the consumers, have more reliable and dependable and affordable energy, because that is critical, especially at this time of rising costs. And we're also trying to work, and I hope we will make a breakthrough on protecting our kids online. Certainly that is an area where we have had bipartisan legislation in the past. We have not advanced a bipartisan bill yet this Congress, but that work continues. And so we've got a lot of great things that we're doing in our committee. And like I said at the beginning, I'm very hopeful that we will be back in the majority by next January and able to really move some of these priorities along that are priorities for our community and for people across the country. So I do have good news to report from the Committee on Energy and Commerce, but more broadly, I would say, Dr. Murillo, and I think it's important, I have been doing this now. I'm in my 8th year serving in Congress, and there is no greater privilege. But Congress is not working the way that it should. And so while we're making some important progress at the margins and in our committees, the Congress is not doing what it should be doing for the American people. And that is an important part of my reporting back to you as well. We can do better. I've seen it. I believe it. I have absolute faith that we can do better. But one of the things we need is to hear from people across the community about what isn't working for them. And everybody needs to hear it. All members of Congress, no matter who represents you, no matter whether they think you agree with them or not. You know, democracy isn't a spectator sport, and making sure that people are calling their representatives, are engaging with them, and are sharing their priorities. We need a Congress that's a lot more responsive to what the people want. That is how it is designed. And I know that's how it can be. But right now, the Congress, I think, isn't doing the critical things that it should be doing to address the concerns and the needs of the American people. And so I will continue to deliver that message. But I also, you know, as soon as I deliver the message that I don't think it's working, I don't want you to lose faith that it can. I absolutely believe that it can. And that's what I'm there to do.
Well, we appreciate you and your entire team and the engagement you've had with the Houston Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We will see you very soon, and thanks for all you do. Bye-bye.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.